So if no question, I then go ahead. किसी का सवाल है तो बोल दो. Okay, I think we should continue with our previous lecture as we discussed last time. Just a minute, please. And you have been informed what do we mean by flow routing. You were informed that it is a kind of process. It is a in which our process through which we transform a hydrograph at some location in a channel to hydrograph at some downstream location, somewhere downstream in the channel. Okay. Somebody is unmuted, and who is he? Only me. Okay. So routing is the process of transformation or changing hydrograph at one location into hydrograph at other location on the downstream side in the same channel. And why we have to do it? Why we need some kind of method of transformation? Why not we just copy the same hydrograph on the downstream location? Because flow is the same, because same water has to pass from some location downstream. When we say some location downstream, a channel should come into your mind, like Ravi River or Indus River should come into your mind. And when we say hydrograph at one location, then some location should come into your mind, like, for example, location at Shadra. And when we say we want to transform the hydrograph at one location, for example, at Shadra, into hydrograph at some location downstream, for example, at Sagya Bridge or at Baloki headworks or somewhere downstream Sidnai headworks. So we have to calculate the hydrograph or find the ordinates of the hydrograph at somewhere downstream. So this is required for knowing the peak of the flood, knowing the volume of the water, knowing the time at which the peak will be coming at location of our interest, if we have the information of the flow at location upstream. So that is a flow routing, and if we carry out for finding the flood through this, so we say flood routing. So similar concept, why we do it. Uh, Two separate methods are available. One is called as a lump method, and one is called as a distributed routing, or and one is called as lump routing. Other name for them is for lump routing. Sometimes we use the name of hydrologic routing, and for distributed routing we use the name of hydraulic routing. And distributed routing tells us the hydrograph at all the cross section in the channel. If I have given the if I have defined the channel shape at 10 locations downstream side, so at all the locations, the distributed routing will tell me the shape of the hydrograph, the maximum of the flow, that is the peak flow, time of its reaching. While in hydrologic routing, it tells me the hydrograph on the downstream side only at one location. So that's why this is said in another way, that the flow is calculated as a function of time alone. So at point of our location, we get the hydrograph and its variation with respect to time. While in case of distributed routing, in lump routing, we get the hydrograph with respect to time at one location, at a particular location. But for distributed routing, we can find the same hydrograph at different location. Another word for location is used as a space. So it calculates the hydrograph at with respect to spatial variation and with respect to temporal variation. हम इसको time variation को temporal variation भी कह देते हैं. Throughout the system, system means your channel, your canal, your river. So that is a system at the moment. System is a very broad term. We use it for different field of life. System analysis is a technique of management, how to carry out the system analysis. So anything which has something input, some transformation and some output, we say this is a system. So we have educational system, something input comes over here, some transformation goes to it, and then we have an output. Anybody will be tell me what is the input to the university educational system and what is the output and what is the transformation? कोई बताएगा? जनरल सी बात है, उसका हाइड्रोलॉजी से कोई ताल्लुक नहीं. Anybody happy to talk? सारे खामोश हैं, नाश्ते नहीं किए हुए लगते. मुइन अवैस क्या हाल है? सिर्फ तुम ग्रीन हो, बाकी सारे रेड हैं.
सर वो बस नेटवर्क था वीक है इसलिए वो अवेलेबल
सिर्फ आप
इन कॉल नहीं आ रहा.
सिर्फ आप अवेलेबल हो, बाकी सारे रेड हैं. दे आर इन अ कॉल, यू आर नॉट इन अ कॉल.
सर वो अपडेट हो जाता है, वो हुआ नहीं इस बार इसलिए.
अच्छा चलो, वह तो वैसे मैंने मजाक किया. हम बताओ सिस्टम से क्या समझ आती है? एजुकेशनल सिस्टम में क्या इनपुट है, क्या आउटपुट है, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन क्या होती है?
सर इनपुट हमें नॉलेज मिल जाता है कि क्या है, आउटपुट इसका प्रैक्टिकल आउट क्या कहते हैं फील्ड में जाके हम इसको क्या कहते हैं प्रैक्टिस कर सकते हैं. और ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन ये हो जाती है कि एक लो मैन से हम एक लो मैन पीयर से एक हाई मैन मतलब थोड़ा सा नॉलेज होता है प्रैक्टिकल के किस तरह इस वर्किंग होती है इंजीनियरिंग की.
सही है, थोड़ा थोड़ा सही है, थोड़ा थोड़ा गलत. एनीबॉडी एल्स विल लाइक टू टॉक? लाइबा लाहौर. Okay, Muin, in my mind, our main input is you people.
Yes, sir.
Our main input is you people. I was talking about university educational system. So our main input is the students, the FSC pass or O-level pass students. Those are the main input. We have other inputs also, like we put the financial resources, we put the human resources over there. So these are our inputs. So, but main ingredient is you people. Transformation is what I am doing now. We are conveying some knowledge. We are transferring some information, some knowledge to you people. We are teaching you some skills. So that is a transformation. That is a change occurring over here. Output will be the you people as a graduate. So that is one kind of output. We have other output also. We have the research production also. We have the some development or some what we call it creations over here also. So, but major output is you people. You people with a higher, as you said, a higher peer. So you people as a graduate are our output. You people as a undergraduate or certificate course passed student as input. And so this is a transformation. So this system analysis can be used for for many kind of aspect. For example, in hydrology, river is a system. Input is the flow at the upstream side. Some transformation occurs within the river reach, and output is the flow at the downstream side. So that's why this is system. We use this word system. Is very broad word. That's why I wanted to talk about it. So in distributed hydraulic routing, distributed or hydraulic routing, flow is calculated as a function of space and time throughout the system. So system is general word. Somebody may not say in simple words, throughout the river length, throughout the river. So we use continuity and momentum equation in distributed routing, and we use continuity equation and another kind of equation we call flow or storage relationship in case of lumped routing. We will be teaching you this distributed routing in subject of hydraulics next semester maybe, or you have studied it. Next semester is 7th semester, and this hydrologic routing we are teaching you today. Why we have to, why we cannot copy the hydrograph at the downstream location? There is some changes occurring while flow passes in a certain length of the river. some storage occurs in the floodplains, and at the later time it comes back to the channel. So hydrograph shape does not remain same uh, because of the friction, because of the flow attenuation. Peak does not reach at the same time on the downstream location, and you can understand this thing. We should not expect that if the peak is occurring at 8 a.m. today at Shadra, at 8 a.m. today, it will not occur at 100 kilometer downstream at Baloki or 200 kilometer, 80 kilometer downstream at Baloki. So it will occur after few hours. So peak time change. Uh, Usually the hydrograph flattens down because of the frictional effect and because of the water going into the floodplains while flooding occur, while water is increasing, then water goes to the storage area we call the bank flooding or the flooding on the sides of the channel. And when flood recedes back, so that floodplains feed back the channel again. So that's why the base time of the hydrograph that enhances. So same thing what I have specified over here, that is shown over here. These are the transformation occurs. For example, at some location upstream, this was the hydrograph observed, blue one. Some location upstream, like at Shadra on Ravi River. So this was a hydrograph. So while it reaches to something somewhere downstream, 80 kilometer downstream, then it will not remain same. So it will be attenuated. We say peak flow attenuation means reduction. It will be lagged. The peak will not be occurring at the same time. It will be lagged. It means there will be a delay, and also its base time. Originally base time was from here to here, so its base time also elongates. So this transformation, and if there is some channel which is joining within 80 kilometers, so that flow will also be added, and then peak may go higher. So if no channel is being added, then usually peak go down. But if some channel is being added in this reach, for example, another river joins in this 80 kilometers, then it is not necessary that it will always go down. But if it is channel has no confluence, no inflow, so then it will be attenuated. And if we see the same thing, same river or same reach in longitudinal direction along the length, so this bottom figure is showing it at a time t. For example, now if I draw the water depth in the whole channel 80 kilometer length, then this blue will be the shape. So this is not hydrograph now. This is called as water surface profile. This hydrograph is with respect to time. So, and profile is elevation of something. If I say this is road profile, it means I am showing the elevation of the roads. If I say this is a profile of the natural topography, I am showing the undulation on the earth surface, natural topography. So if I say water surface profile, it means I am showing the elevation of the water surface at a particular time. So this is the water surface profile at time t. If I make the water surface profile after some time t plus delta t, so then I will not get the same. This flood in this profile, what I am seeing is a flood wave. I am seeing a higher elevation at one location and lower elevation at downstream and the upstream side. So I will say that I will see that this flood wave have propagated down. It have moved down. So this propagation we can see, and so it means and this will not be having the same elevation. It will be attenuating also. So in this way we can see that there is some change occur while flow passes from one place to other place through a river channel. So this transformation has been estimated by the method of the routing. One method of the routing is usually called as the storage equation, is usually called as reservoir routing. And in that routing, we use this continuity equation. Continuity equation is the other name for law of conservation of the mass. If we say you have studied it in FSC and earlier classes, that mass cannot be created and cannot be destroyed. So same concept have been used in case of river also. It has been seen that, and it has been proved that if inflow and outflow are same in a certain river reach, we call it as a system. If inflow and outflow are the same, then the volume which is stored within that reach of the river remains same. There is no change of the volume of water in the river reach. And volume, other name for the volume in hydrology, we say storage. Another name for the volume of the water in the river or in a reservoir, we say storage. Storage or volume are the same thing. So if inflow and outflow are the same, then there will be no change of the storage. But if inflow at the upstream location and outflow at the downstream location are different, then their difference will be equal to the change of storage within a certain time step. Change of storage within certain time step. Whatever I am saying is specified over here, that if inflow is I and outflow is O, hopefully you understand. Inflow means something coming to the system, outflow leaving the system. Inflow minus outflow is equal to change of storage per unit time if inflow and outflow are in the units of discharge. If inflow is volume coming to the system, outflow is the volume going out of the system, then this will be equal to delta S ds only, not divided by dt. So in routing, we take inflow in the units of discharge, we take outflow in the, and this is related to the earlier lecture of the mass balance studies in the system. Earlier study we have we call them hydrologic equations. This is the same. So this is the mass conservation equation or the continuity equation. The difference of the inflows and outflow is equal to the rate of change of storage if inflow and outflow are in the units of discharge, cubic meter per second or Q6 per second. So same thing can be written in another way. If this is carried out, if we can understand this for a smaller time period in which inflow and outflow are not changing, then this equation is good. But if for a larger time span, inflow and outflow are changing, so then we should discretize them, we should divide them into smaller time spans, and then we should calculate the variation of the discharge, variation of the storage in smaller time steps, and then we should sum them together. So that is what the integration do. Over a larger time step between T1 and T2, we calculate the change of storage by integrating this above equation. So if we take the integral of the above equation on the both side, first bringing this dt on the left hand side, then we can write the above equation as change in storage is equal to final storage S2 minus initial storage S1 is equal to integral of I with respect to integral of I with time step dt from time t1 to t2 minus integration or summation of outflows into dt from time step t1. So these are the two ways of describing the continuity or mass balance equation, and this is used in routing also, because we want to calculate hydrograph at some location downstream in routing. So that means we have a certain length of the channel. It means it have a certain storage inside it. So I and inflow and outflow and the change of the storage are the relevant parameters. And if variation is linear, we can take between two times between time step. If the variation is linear, the above equation can be written in this way: average of the two inflows into T minus average of the two outflows into T is equal to the change in storage. Above equation, this one can be written in this way if variation is can be approximated as linear variation. To provide a more convenient form of hydrologic routing, it is commonly assumed that flows between two time steps between T1 and T2 having time interval T. So this T is the difference of time T2 and T1 are varying linearly. So if they are varying linearly, initially it is I1, finally it is I2. So then we can take average as I1 plus I2 divided by 2, multiply by T. We get the volume of inflow. We get the volume of the outflow. So that must be equal to change of storage. If S1 was the initial storage, S2 is the final storage. So change in storage is S2 minus S1. If you see this equation, if I have the hydrograph at upstream location, if I have the hydrograph at upstream location, and I have the initial outflow quantity also, then in this equation, most of the parameters are known. I1 is known, I2 is known. I1 is the inflow at time step T1. I2 is the inflow at time step T2. Because the whole hydrograph at upstream location is known, so all inflows are known to me. I1, I2, I3, I4, I5, all of them are known to me. Initially, what is going out of the system should be known to us. O1 is usually known to us. Initially, channel is before a flood is starting, before direct runoff started, initial flow at the downstream location should be known to us. So O1 is also known to us. O2 is not known to us, and another thing, S2 is not known to us. O2 is the outflow at next time step. O2 is the outflow at next time step, and S1 is the initial storage in the channel. Whatever is the volume of the water within the channel initially, maybe it is dry, it is zero, but it has certain depth, so it has certain storage. So initial storage is known to us. So in this equation, except for S2 and O2, everything is usually known to us when we start a routing process, when we start calculating flow parameters at downstream location. So that is what is mentioned over here. I1, I2, S1, O1, and time step. These are known to us. Only S2 and O2 are unknown. So he want to mention that there are two unknowns in this equation, but we have only one equation over here. So mathematics tell us that for solution of the for finding some unknown variables, if unknown variables are multiple, so same number of equation we should have. So that's what it is said over here, that we need to have uh, another equation so that we can find these two unknown. In lumped routing, the other equation is found. In lumped routing, the other equation is found from relationship of storage and outflow. For a certain channel or for a certain reservoir, if we have some relationship between how much will be the outflow if storage in the channel is so much, so then that can serve as a second equation. So if two equations are there with us, so simultaneously solving these equations solve our problem of routing step by step. For a one time step, we find O2, and then that becomes O1 for next time step. So in this way, step by step, we solve the problem. This storage outflow relationship or volume in the channel and outflow relationship is easy to find. For example, just suppose at the downstream of the channel, at the downstream of the channel, we have a weir installed over there. So you know the weir formula is Q is equal to a coefficient times length of the weir times head above the weir power 3 by 2 if it is rectangular weir. You remember notch formula, coefficient of discharge times width of the notch times h head above the crest of the notch power 3 by 2. So similar formula is there for broad crested weirs also, and similar formula are there if some other kind of structure is there for flow measurement. So if you reconsider this formula, Q is equal to some coefficient multiply by geometrical parameters length of the multiply by head power 3 by 2. So we can say for a certain weir, everything else is constant, coefficient is constant, length is constant, Q is function of h power 3 by 2. Our outflow is function of head above the crest. So similar functions are usually available. Storage, so storage means volume of water in the channel, that is function of depth in the channel. As the depth increases, storage increases. As the depth further increases, storage increases. So storage is a function of elevation, And if we know the elevation or head in the channel, we can calculate how much outflow is possible from this channel. So usually we have such relationship available to us, and we can apply that relationship, and we can resolve our problem of finding the downstream hydrograph if we have the upstream hydrograph known to us. So any question up till now? So that is one way of routing. Theoretical background is this one. This slide tells you how you can calculate the storage in the channel with respect to different depth. This slide tells you how you can calculate the storage in a channel. Whatever I am talking, it is good for a storage reservoir also, and this is good for a channel also, river channel also. So if you want to find the relationship between elevation at this depth, how much is the storage, at this depth, how much is the storage, what is the possible option with you? Nothing, no option, but you should know the shape of the channel, you should know the length of the channel, so that you can calculate the volume at a certain depth. You can calculate the volume at another depth. You can calculate volume at another depth. So this thing is done usually by finding the cross section of the channel. Before a relationship in storage and flow can be established, it is necessary to compute storage or volume in the channel or a reservoir at various times at various elevation. Obvious method of determining this storage is calculated to calculate volumes in channel from cross sections. So cross sections you will get through surveying. Physically, you have to survey that channel. If channel is dry, normal survey can be done. If the channel has water inside it, hydrographic survey is done. In hydrographic survey, we move along the width of the channel, and we find depth of the water at different locations within the cross section. So in this way, we find the cross section of the channel, and whole group of people are working in irrigation department and in WAPDA who are calculating these things regularly, because channel shape changes with because of sedimentation or erosion. Channel shape usually does not remain constant. So a whole group of people are working in the field. So that's why this surveying is important in civil engineering, in hydraulics, in hydrology also. In addition to layout of the buildings, in layout of the roads, this river cross sections and the reservoir cross sections are also found by them. Another method is there. If it is very deep channel, sometimes the boat method does not work. We can simple sounding is not working. Sounding is putting a rod inside the water and finding the depth. That is what we call as a sounding. Finding the cross section by sounding means you have a rod, you have a long bamboo kind of things, and you put it simply in the channel and you find the depth. So that is simple and accurate method. But if it is very deep channel, 100 feet deep channel, you don't find the rods of such much depth. So then we go to the other methods. We call it sonar survey. So in that we use some electronic instrument which is emitting sound waves, and the time taken by the sound wave to come back to the boat, to come back to the instrument. So that time of the sound wave is measured electronically, and knowing the sound wave speed in water, we can convert how much is the depth of the channel at this location. So that depth of the water in the channel is used to calculate the cross section. So if you have the cross section at different location, you can use prismoidal method or trapezoidal method to calculate the volume. If you have a trapezoid at one location, trapezoid at another location, you can find the volume at other places. Just hold a minute. I am sorry for disturbance. I lost my metric and FSC certificates, and today I have received it. That was the call. Okay. Where we were? C. Gianni, CJ, C. Jaini, Pereira, my Sri Lankan friend. Farida, Pirara,
Yes.
how are you? So can you tell me where we were before I stopped lecture? Don't say, sir, I was not listening. Farida, I think she will take more time. So today I don't have time. Hamama Pari. Hamna hai ya hamama? I don't know. Hamama. Hamama Pari.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell me where we were before I stopped?
सर हम स्टोरेज इक्वेशन और डिटर्मिनेशन ऑफ स्टोरेज वगैरह पढ़ रहे थे.
Thank you very much. So I was talking about how to calculate the cross sections and then how to use. So that gave me the confidence. At least somebody is listening. That Pereira have. Okay, I don't use the word that disappointed me, but I have used it. Pereira, you should be active and you should be listening. That's not the way of attending the lecture. Got it? Okay. So we can calculate this storage or volume using the cross section, which we have got from survey, and using the Prismidal formula. At the end of the lecture, I have put the Prismidal formula. Reason is that sometimes we don't remember these things. These you have studied in surveying. Volume is equal to depth by 3 into first section plus last section plus 4 times of even sections plus 2 times of odd sections. So that is part of what we call it surveying subject. You have used this formula to calculate the volume of the road. Similar formula can be used to know the cross sections volume within the channel also. Maybe you remember something now. Okay, so it means storage at different depth is known to you, and I have already told you if you know the water level or depth or head above the crest of the weir, you can have the relationship between outflow and the storage, outflow and the head. So in this way, level pool routing, or we also call it reservoir routing, whatever I am teaching you, that is also called as reservoir routing or level pool routing. You see, we have relationship between elevation and storage. This one, this red one. We have relationship between elevation and discharge. I have just talked to you. If you have the water level known to you, you can have a relationship. Let us suppose its shape is this one. So if these two are the information with us, so it means we can find a relationship between storage and discharge. Discharge means outflow from the channel. So that is until now only know that for a certain channel we can find the relationship between storage in the channel and the outflow quantity which is possible from that channel. So if this relationship is with us, so then what they do is this equation is written in another format, and practical way of solving this method is for a certain discharge find elevation, for a certain outflow find the elevation, and then find the storage, because we have this relationship with us. For a certain outflow we find at what elevation this is possible, and then we find what will be the storage in the channel at that elevation, and then calculate a parameter. We say 2s over delta t, 2s over delta t plus outflow. So that is the discharge or outflow. And then plot this curve between 2s over dt plus O and O. This is a easy way of solving this problem. Theoretically, we can simply say if you have two equations, you have two unknown, mathematically you find it. Before calculators and computers were very common, people used to use this graphical method. They made a graph of 2s over delta t plus O versus O, and then they transform the equation, the continuity equation in this way. Everything which was known to them, I1, I2, S1, T, O1, everything which was known to them was written on one side. Everything which was not known to them, that is S2 and O2 terms, those were written on the right hand side. So from the known thing, they had found the left hand side. It means they knew what is 2s over t plus o. So for this 2s over t plus o, if they had the curve of 2s over t, previous one, if they had this curve 2s over t plus o versus o, so from this curve they can find how much is the outflow going out of this channel. So that is what is written over here. All parameters on the left side are known and are calculated, are known, and so left hand side is calculated. It means we can find 2s over t plus o2 at a certain time. We can find this, and using the graph and using the value we have just calculated, they find O from the graph, and that is the outflow. That is the outflow in the next time step. So it means for the outflow hydrograph, we have calculated outflow. So for one time step, this calculation is complete now. Now you have I1, you have I2, you have O1, you have O2. So now go to the next time step, and because whole the inflow hydrograph is known to you, only unknown will be outflow at the next time step. So repeat the same thing and find O again. Repeat this process and the whole ordinates of the hydrograph are calculated. So that is one method to be used for reservoir routing or for channel routing. We can easily use this method over here. Second method, which is more commonly used, and we call it uh, wedge storage method or prism storage method, and another name given to it is Muskingum method. In this method, they use the concept that they try to calculate the water stored in the wedges of the channel. When channel is flowing uniformly, then water is parallel to the bed of the channel. But when there is a flood wave coming, you see its shape will be something like this. A simplified flood wave is shown by this line. So anything above the normal depth of the water in the channel, they call this is the wedge storage or prism storage. They call this as the wedge storage or prism storage. The storage between the channel bed and the line parallel to it is called prism storage. So bottom one is the prism storage, the top triangular one is the wedge storage. Any storage between the line and actual water profile is called wedge storage. Got it? We should understand what is prism storage and what is wedge storage. The storage between the channel bed and a line parallel to it. So this is channel bed. Over here, line parallel to it is this one. So this one is the prism storage over here. Over here, this is the bed. This is the line parallel to it. So this is prism storage over here. Over here, prism storage is from this line, parallel line, up to the bed line. So this is the prism storage, top line and this. Over here, this bottom line over here. So this is the prism storage. And wedge storage is the storage between actual water surface profile and the line parallel to the bed, and the line parallel to the bed. For example, over here, so this is the actual water surface profile, this line, and the line parallel to the bed is this one. So this one will be called as a wedge storage. Over here, this will be the wedge storage. This is the line parallel to the bed, and this is the actual water surface profile. Over here, this will be wedge storage. So it can be a positive wedge and it can be a negative wedge storage. During rising stages means when flood is increasing, a considerable volume may consist of these wedges before any large outflow occurs. As the falling starts, inflow drops more rapidly than outflow, and negative wedge storage may exist. So when there is increasing of the flood, positive wedge storage occurs when there is receding floods, water level is reducing. So negative wedge storage to occur. So there, here we are seeing a negative wedge storage. Here we are seeing a positive wedge storage. So this wedge storage, people have tried to find the prism storage and the wedge storage by relating the it to the inflows and outflows. There was a hydrologist whose name was Muskingum, and he proposed that to find the second equation to correct the problem of two unknowns in the storage equation. There are few analytical techniques. One of them is given by Muskingum. He says that storage is function of inflows and outflows uh, um, with the powers m over n to them, and they are multiplying with a weighing factor x and multiplied with a weighing factor 1 minus x to see the influence of inflow and outflow, to control the influence of inflow and to control the influence of outflow. So this is the weighing factor x, and it varies from theoretically it can vary from 0 to 1. For example, if x is equal to 1, for example, if x is equal to 1, only inflow will be controlling storage. So because 1 minus 1 will become 0, so outflow will have no effect. For example, if x is 0, so then outflow will be controlling. So x is a mathematical coefficient which controls the effect of inflow and outflow on the storage. And this is put in the hand of the user. For a certain channels, it is said that select a suitable x value that gives you proper shape for the outflow hydrograph, depending upon how much is the influence of inflow and how much is the influence of the outflow. So this is nothing but a weighing factor controlling the effect of inflow and outflow. These exponents are exponents they have derived from discharge equation of the channel. Q is equal to A power H power, Q is equal to A times H power N. This is a simplified form of Manning's or Chasey equation. If I remind you Manning's equation, which is velocity is equal to 1 over n r power 2 by 3 s power half for a certain channel having a constant slope s. So s becomes constant. N for a certain channel is usually constant. So velocity is equal to some constants times r power 2 by 3. So r is what? Hydraulic radius. So that is dependent upon depth in the channel or head in the channel, depth of the water in the channel. So simplified form, velocity in a channel can be written as depth, a function of the depth. And if velocity is a function of depth, similarly, if I multiply velocity with the area, so area is also a function of the depth. More the depth, more the area. More the depth, more the area. So discharge, which is product of velocity and area, that is also a function of depth. So simplified form, for a certain channel, we can say that discharge in a channel is a function of some coefficients A times head or depth in the channel power n. So for different channel, n is different. For different channels, A is different. So we can say that n is exponent of the discharge equation in the channel, while m is exponent of storage equation in the channel. From where this equation comes, I have shown you a storage relationship, storage with elevation relationship, elevation versus storage relationship. So we can make an equation for this line, we can make equation for this line, and we can get some exponential equation of these two shapes. So exponent for discharge equation is n, exponent for storage equation is m. So this m over n exponents are taken from the discharge equation and the storage equation for that channel. And b over a are the multiplying coefficient of these equations. B and a are the So Muskingum say the storage is function of inflow and outflow with power m over n multiplied with the sum of weighing factor x and 1 minus x and multiplied by their exponent. So that is how he proposed this equation. And combining this equation with the conservation equation, continuity equation, he has proposed a simplified form of that equation as storage is equal to k times that coefficient x into I plus, but the above equation can be written in this way: x into I power m over n is taken as 1. M over n is taken as 1. Both exponent for storage and discharge, it has been observed, they are nearly equal to each other. When they are nearly equal to each other, so m over n ratio becomes 1, and the ratio b over a is taken as k. Just to simplify it, they say instead of writing b over a, simply write k over here. So b over a is replaced with k, x is written as it is, I power m over n is written as I because m over n is taken as 1. So that is the other way of writing this Muskingum equation, this one. So k times x into I power 1 plus 1 minus x into O power 1. So the same equation is written over here. So and with this equation, it has been found that usually for normal channels, for natural streams, x value varies not from 0 to 1, as I already early said. Theoretically, it should change from 0 to 1. But for natural channels, this value varies from 0 to 0.3, and most probable value is 0.2. Mean value is 0.2. So if you have the idea, if you have the inflow and outflow hydrograph already with you, we have method available to calculate this x value. In the later part of this lecture, we will be calculating x value. We will be telling you how to calculate this x value. But if for a certain channel x value is not known to you, you don't have the outflow hydrograph known to you, and then x can be assumed as equal to 0.2, keeping in mind it varies from 0 to 0.3. So, and it is also said that its value is 0 if wedge storage is insignificant. If shape of the if the shape of the flood wave is very, if shape of the flood wave is very mild, if it is very flattened, then wedge storage reduces to very low limits. In that case, x should also be taken close to 0. So lower the wedge storage, lower should be x value. So if it is a big, huge flood wave, so wedge storage is quite high, then x value should be taken on higher side. So when we apply this Muskingum equation for a reservoir routing, in reservoir usually water surface is constant. So in that case, we can take smaller values. For reservoir, we take 0, x is taken as 0. So that means x is 0 means storage will be function of outflow only. Storage will be function of outflow only. So in that case, this will happen. So this equation is given by Muskingum method, and k is called as storage constant. We have told you what should be the normal value for x. As far as k is concerned, although actual value should be taken if you have these equations available to you, k is representing the time of the peak of the hydrograph, travel time of the hydro. It is approximately equal to time of the travel through the reach. How much flood wave takes to travel from upstream location to the downstream location. K is the representation of that one. So if you can initially when you start the routing, so k is not known to you, you see how much is the travel time between these two locations. So that can be found if you can estimate average velocity of the flood wave or average velocity of the flow over there. So from there you can have idea of how much should be k, and that k is usually in units of the k are usually time units. So how to apply this equation? We have storage equation known to us, that is the continuity equation known to us. In above equation, this S term is replaced from the Muskingum equation. Muskingum did it. the S2 which was not known to him. So that was replaced from this equation. And finally, he got an equation for computing the outflow at the next time step from the inflow at initial inflow, final inflow, and initial outflow, multiplying them with some coefficient C0, C1, and C2. When he put the Muskingum equation of storage into continuity equation, so we are solving them. Then equation becomes equal to this one if O2 is written on the left hand side, and this C0 is a coefficient which is a function of K and X and time, and K is the time of travel coefficient of Muskingum equation. K is the storage constant, X is the weighing factor, we know it, time T is the time step. So C0 is equal to minus times Kx minus 0.5t or K minus Kx plus 0.5t. So this is this equation is actually we have to remember to apply the Muskingum flow routing method to calculate the outflow hydrograph. And it is easy to remember this equation. It is not difficult. O2 is equal to uh, I2 plus I1 plus O1 and multiply them with coefficient C0, C1 and C2. And there is an easy way of remembering this coefficient also, C0, C1 and C2 also. There is easy way. This C0 has a negative sign with it. All of these equations have same denominator, K minus Kx plus 0.5t, K minus Kx plus 0.5t, K minus Kx plus 0.5. So denominator are same, only we have to remember the upper numerators. And these numerators are also easy to remember. Just remember one of them. C0 is Kx minus 0.5t, C1 will be plus 0.5t, and C2 has similar to the denominator but with a negative term with a 0.5t over here. So that's how we remember them, C0, C1, C2. If K and X and time step is known, all these three coefficients can be calculated. K is the travel time from the upstream location to the downstream location. X is the weighing factor, usually we take it 0.2 if no other information is with us. And T is the time step you have calculated to calculate the hydrograph ordinates. Hydrograph ordinates should be calculated at suitable intervals so that the shape can be preserved, 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days. If it is a several days hydrograph, so maybe coarser time steps can be taken. So if these three coefficients are known to you, the unknown O2 can be calculated from these known parameters. Inflow, everything is known to us. Initial outflow is known to us. So at one time step, O2 is calculated, and then we repeat it for the next time step by taking this, whatever is calculated, this will become as O1. For the next time step, this will become O1. So that is what is mentioned over here. And here is the problem on which it has been applied, and you should calculate it yourself at home. I show you how I have done it in Excel. For the given inflow hydrograph, compute outflow hydrograph if K is 2 days. K is given to you. So reach is so large that in 2 days flow or the flood wave reaches from the upstream location to the downstream location, and X is taken as 0.2. Routing period is 1 day. Routing period is 1 day. This time step is in days, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5. So don't consider, so we need to know the units of these time steps. Discharge is in cubic meter per second. Initial inflow, initial outflow may be taken as 4,000. So O1 is known to you. These will be called as inflows, I1, I2, I3, I4. Initially, these will be called like that. But because we have to apply this Muskingum method on what certain time steps, so first we will be applying between these two inflows. This is I1, this is I2. O1 is 4,000. K is given. So if K and X are known to you, simply apply this equation and take T as a time step, 1 day. That need to be converted, I think, into seconds. Let us check it. If K is in days, so T should be taken in the same units. in the same units. So in Excel, I have done it. I show you how to do it, and you should try at home, and you must try it at home because this is necessary part of our curriculum, flood frequency and Muskingum method. So some of the question I have done in this Excel file. Muskingum method. So that is the question given to you. And what have been informed to you, I show you. X was given to you as 0.2, K was given to you as 2 days. Time steps delta T was 1 day. So C0, C2 and C3, C0, C1 and C2 have been calculated using this equation. Minus Kx minus 0.5T and so. So using this formula, this once you have to calculate this. C0, C1, C2. I'm showing you this formula also how to apply it, and because it is being recorded, you can get the help. One check for your calculation is that sum of them should be equal to 1. Their summation is equal to 1. And usually we don't get negative value for this C0, C1, C2. Denominator I calculated once because that is common. So the top I repeated, the top one is calculated everywhere and then divided by the denominator. And you see denominator is common to every coefficient, k minus kx plus 0.5t, k minus kx plus 0.5t. So once C0, C1, C2 is with you, now we carry out the calculation in this format. We carry out the calculation. Initially you have inflows, so whatever was written over there was discharge. I know this is the inflow hydrograph, so I designate it as I. So that is known to us. Time is in days. Outflow is, initial outflow is known to us. That's why I made it bold. So this one is the first calculation done through the Muskingum routing method. And what was the formula for that? I2, O2 is equal to C0 times I1, C0 times I2 plus C1 times I1 and then C2 times I2, O1. C0 times I2 plus C1 times I1 plus C2 times O1. I2, I1, O1. Remember this, what we say, order, because multiplying coefficient are with respect to that. I2 should be multiplied with C0, I1 with C1 and O1 with the. So initially we have two I's. Initially the second I is multiplied with C0. So remember in this way. So this one I2 multiplied by C0, H8. I2 multiplied by C0. So H8 is being multiplied with E8. Where is E8? E8 is this one. So C0 is being multiplied with 7,000 and so on. So this simple calculation. And O2 has been calculated. So in that equation, this is O2. Once this is known to you, now you solve this part. This will becomes O1, this will become I1, this will become I2. So calculate this one, then calculate this one, then calculate this one. So you will be getting a flow hydrograph at the downstream location. Then plot this one. So this one is the initial hydrograph. I have extended this hydrograph for unlimited time. This one was given because still outflow hydrograph was changing. I extended it with the constant discharges for more time steps. So that's what this hydrograph shape is made in this way. If I plot it only for the given duration, it will become like this. So this is the hydrograph which was given, inflow hydrograph, and outflow hydrograph from this one will be made this one. So that is the outflow hydrograph. So this red one is outflow hydrograph, this is the inflow hydrograph. Because I wanted to see the time till that, till original discharge have been recovered back 4000 has been obtained, I extended the inflow hydrograph with the constant discharges, and what I got was this one then. Then I got the 4000 at the outflow location, at the downstream location, was achieved after 12 days. So hopefully you can do it, Muskingum routing method, and similarly you can do that one also, the channel routing or level pool routing we call it, the previous one. If you have the outflow relationship with you, for example, somebody tell you that outflow is equal to so much time h power so much, so that equation and the continuity equation solved together will tell you the outflow. And the same concept has been used by the Muskingum, but he has proposed his outflow equation in the form of k and x, s is equal to k times xi plus 1 minus x times o, and he then used that information and provided us with the equation of the outflow ordinate at one time step. So any question in this, you can ask me. I continue with this. I stop the recording, so you should have a small recording. So I will answer military attendance. Download, manage, download attendance list. Hopefully it will be downloaded in the download. I put it on the WhatsApp. कोई बोलना चाह रहा है? आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही, आज तो माइक से शोर आ रहा है. Who wants to talk? I don't see any mic open. Okay, in continuation, if K and X are known to you, if inflow hydrograph is known to you, and initial outflow is known to you, this is the method to calculate next time step outflow, and then next time step outflow, and then next time step outflow, and the whole hydrograph. Up till now, any question? We should have this equation known to us. Outflow is C naught I2 plus C1 I1 plus C2 O1. C naught equation should be known to us, Kx minus 0.5 T whole multiplied by minus into K minus Kx plus 0.5 T. And similarly C1 and C2. And that's how we do it. If K and X you have to determine, then a method is given by the books of hydrology. One way of finding K and X is already told to you. K is the travel time of the peak of the flood in the channel. If we assume that water is flowing at 2 meters per second or 1 meter per second, usually in flood duration they flow rapidly. In low flow season they flow slowly. So assuming a suitable flow, and by the way, in hydrology books, we have tens of equations available which can tell us for a different kind of watershed, different kind of slope of the watershed, what is approximate time of the travel of the peak, return period of, not return period, but we call it time of concentration of a catchment. So we have different equations available. We are not telling you in this literature, but if somebody is interested, concentration time equations are available. That can be used to have an approximate idea of how much will be the travel time of the flood wave from one location to other location. If you have no other method, you can assume a suitable n value, you can assume a suitable cross section, and you can find approximate velocity using Manning equation. Approximate because you are supposing a cross section, you are supposing a slope, you are supposing an n value. So those should be matching with the characteristics of the channel and the catchment. Then you can have the idea of velocity. If velocity is approximated, you can find the time of travel also. So that is how we do it. But if you are lucky for the channel which you are analyzing, you have the inflow hydrograph known to you, you have outflow hydrograph known to you, observed. If you have inflow hydrograph observed at one location, if you have outflow hydrograph observed, you have two gauging station, you have two hydrological station. If this is the case, you can estimate K and X from the method we are going to tell you over here. X can be approximated and then X can be calculated and then K can be found. So what is the method that is being told to you through a example over here? For example, in a channel, you have a inflow hydrograph and you have outflow hydrograph at different time steps. Now time step is in hours. So inflow hydrograph 93, 137, outflow hydrograph 85, this, and they continue up till, this is the continuation of this table. So up till time step 10 hours, it is given over here, 11, 12, 13, it continues in this table. So if this is known to you, we make a graph between xi plus 1 minus xo versus s. In this graphical method, we generate a graph between x into I plus 1 minus x into O versus S storage. Because you have the inflows and outflows with you, you can calculate by assuming a certain x value. Initially, we assume x value, then we correct it. So assume a suitable x value and find this left-hand term. And you have the initial storage with known to you, and the next time storage also you can find from difference of the inflows and outflows will tell you the difference of the storage during a time step, add it to the previous storage. So storage can also be calculated at different time step if inflow and outflow are known to you. So when you have the graph of these two parameters with you, then change x value so that the graph becomes a linear line. If x value is wrong, this graph will be a loop curve. If x value is wrong, you will be having two lines, one for increasing discharges, one for reducing discharges. So you have to find that x value which gives you both increasing flood line and the decreasing flood line at the same location. So you have a linear line, and we will do it. You will see it how x variation changes this. So once you have find the correct value of x, then the slope of that curve will tell you the k value, because you know storage was equal to k times xi plus 1 minus x into O. Initially we assume k is equal to 1, but if there is a graph available between these two parameters, so their slope, their ratio should tell you the k value. So that is done using Excel again. I will go to the Excel directly rather than showing you over here. This specify how we have done it. These two things are known to us: inflow hydrograph, outflow hydrograph. Then to calculate the change in storage, then we have taken the average of the two inflows and average of the two outflows, and then column 3 minus column 4. This column minus column, this will tell you the change of storage into T. So that is the volume change. Inflow, average inflow minus average outflow into time step. That is the volume of water, change of storage. Add it into the previous storage. Previous storage initially was known to us, so add it. So this is the new storage with you. So this column gives you the new storage or total storage with you. This column is x into I plus 1 minus x into O. X into I plus 1 minus x into O. So these two values are, using these two values, this have been calculated. So once you have the these two columns completed, you can draw the hydrograph. In this column, you need to initially suppose some x value. Then you will having a graph. If that graph is a linear line, x value is correct. Otherwise, change x value so that you should get a linear line. So that is how it's done over here. Muskingum K and X value, how to find Muskingum K and X. The same information which was given to you is rewritten over here. Inflow is known to us, outflow is known to us. So that is what is known to us. And I did not plot their hydrograph. I have calculated average I, average O as it is informed in the previous figure. Storage is calculated, change of storage is calculated by average inflow minus average outflow into time step. If you see this formula, average inflow minus average outflow, H6 minus I6. H6 is this one, I6 is this one. So their difference is the net outflow multiplied by the time step. So I have taken the difference of these two time steps, 2 minus 1, that becomes 1 hour into, I converted into seconds. This 1 day is 1 hour is converted into second because inflow were in cubic meter per second. So I have to multiply it, the seconds in this time step. So that is how the change in storage is calculated. I added it into previous storage and I get that final storage over here. Okay, I added this change of storage into the previous storage, I got the final storage. So that is the one column. Other column, our ordinate is xi plus 1 minus x into O. So for example, over here, this one is calculated using this as I and O and multiply it with the x. So x is supposed over here. So let us suppose average value of x, which is given by the literature 0.2. So when you have to suppose x value, it should be between 0 to 0.3, but more commonly it is close to 0.2. So assuming 0.2 value, so these ordinates have been calculated, x into I plus 1 minus x into O. So when both of these columns are with you, plot them. So when we have plotted storage on one side and x into I plus 1 minus x into O on the other side, so we get these two lines. We get a looped curve. We say this is a looped curve. Now keeping this curve in front of you, you can see changing x, how does it change? If I increase it to 0.3, so it has further deteriorated. It is not going to single. If I choose it to 0.1, it has not reached. So in between 0.15, if I do it, it is close to this one. So by trial and error, you can find x value, and you can, if x value is known to you, then slope of this curve will give you the k value. And of course, over here, because discharge is in cubic meter per second, storage is in cubic meter, what you will be getting will be seconds. While you divide storage with the discharge, you will be getting seconds, and that you have to convert it into the days or into hours, whatever the units you want to find. So that is how we calculate k and x. K is the discharge coefficient, what they call it. K is the storage coefficient बोला था, क्या बोला था इसने? Assumes K to be constant. Storage constant. In Muskingum method, K is the storage constant and X is the weighing factor. So that's conclude this lecture, how to calculate K and X value for a certain channel if inflow hydrograph is known to you, outflow hydrograph is known to you. Why we are calculating K and X? Because in future we want to use this K and X to route the flood. If another flood comes, this K and X will be used for this channel. They are constant for a certain channel, for a certain reach. So we can use this one. So any question in this flood routing or flow routing method? Muskingum routing have been informed to you. A problem have been shown to be solved. And please practice it. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. So next, I take a 5-minute break and then I start the sediment erosion. And in the next lecture, maybe groundwater hydrology, we will do it. So 5 minute break I am taking. How many are you are with me? अटेंडेंस मैंने डाल दी थी, मीटिंग अटेंडेंस. Let's see here. So no break. I will continue it. Let's see here, please. File open. So few concept about soil erosion we have to tell you. Up till now, what we were talking in hydrology was water. That is important. How to quantify water, important. How to measure it, important. If you have the information at one location, how to convert that information into another location, important. Quite important. But another aspect is also important, the constituents which are coming with the water. That is also important. So this topic, very briefly, we will telling you the main constituents we call sediments coming with the water, flowing with the water. So why we have to study them? That you should understand. What are the processes which bring them to the water? That is important. What are different ways of managing those? Do we need to manage them? उनके ध्यान करने की जरूरत है कि नहीं है? So first I will tell you why we studying this topic, why we are interested in the constituents of the water. There are many constituents, but at the moment I will be talking only to those constituents which are the sediments, which are called as the sediments. In addition to that, there are some nutrients also present in the water. Some chemical are also mixed with the water. We call them as the dissolved salts, nitrogen, phosphorus. I'm not talking about them. Only the parts of the broken rocks, we call them sediment. So why should we measure them? Why should we concern about them? So that is important. For example, one aspect of measuring the sediments coming with the water is that initially when people have made the channel, man-made channels, canals, man-made channels are canals. Initially, when they dug it and they start them flowing, they make them operational. After a few years, a couple of years, they were unfunctional because of sediment deposited within those channels, or because of the higher erosion in those channels, and those were broken. So then people thought, why, what is happening? So then they say it is the sediments which are coming with the water. They are also important to be considered. Each flowing water, all the flowing water have a certain capacity to carry sediments. The flowing water have certain capacity to carry sediments, depending upon its depth of water, depending upon its mainly velocity. And the velocity is controlled by the slope of that area. So each flowing channel has a certain capacity to carry the water. If that to carry the sediments, if that much sediments are available in water, so it will run without excessive deposition and excessive erosion. But if those sediments are not present in the water, it will erode the bed. It will carry the sediments from the bed, and the bed and the side of the channel will be damaged, eroded. So they have found this from the experiments and experiences, and a few terminology will be. So that's why study of the sediments carrying capacity of the channel is important. We are not going to tell you in this subject what are the formula required for finding the carrying capacity. In hydraulic subject, we will be telling you those things. So what is a soil erosion? While soil detach from the earth is made of different kind of materials, and those small particles of the earthen material is called as soil or sediments. So small detached particles. So erosion is the detachment. Other name for the detachment of the soil is called as erosion. Soil erosion is detachment of the soil particles. Uh, if this happens because of usually it happens because of the raindrop impact. When a drop of rain falls on the soil, on the earth's surface, it has a certain force with it. You see, this is a small drop, but it has a certain amount of force inside it. So multiple of those raindrops, when falling at a certain location, they put a lot of erosive, it has a lot of erosive capability. So that is a main reason of soil erosion. And also the overland flow, when water starts flowing over the catchment, that flowing water exerts some shear stress on the bed of the on the earthen surface. So that shear stress also erodes some soil from it, and then it is transported to the next point, and it is moved from that place to the next place. That is what the sediment transport has started. One thing is detachment of the soil, and then its movement of that soil. So that detachment is soil erosion, and the movement is a transport of that sediment. Movement of the detached soil particles by overland flow, oblique channel flow. So we call this thing as sediment transport. Soil erosion is detachment, and detachment occurs either by the raindrops or by the overland flow. And the transport occurs because of the overland flow and the channel flow. The difference between overland flow is usually the flow over the surface of the land is in thin sheets. Its depth is not very high. We don't see it like moving in a kind of channel. Channel is when flow got sufficient depth which can be measured. We say now channel flow have occurred. There is a difference of the depth between the overland flow and the channel flow. Channel has considerable depth with respect to width, while the overland flow has very small depth with respect to the width of that area. It detach, first the soil particle detach because of the raindrops, then that detached particles detachment also occurs because of the overland flow, then transport occurs because of the overland flow and the channel runoff. And at some place, so it is not only the deposition, it is not only the detachment and the transport. At certain location, water speed reduces, water velocity reduces, or flow reduces, and water cannot carry those transported sediment, and water deposits sediment over there. One particular location of deposition which we can see is, if we obstruct the flow in a channel, then velocity of the water reduces and deposition of the sediment start occurring on the upstream side. So when we made a dam in the channel, so dams start stopping the sediments. Water flows underneath, over the dam or over the spillway or through the tunnels, and the sediments are deposited over there. So sediment erosion, sediment transport, and sediment deposition. These are the 2-3 phenomena. You should be knowing it, and through a figure it is shown over here. A raindrop is occurring over there, and somebody have taken a picture with a high-speed camera. They can see the splashes over here. This is simply a one of the raindrop. So when the raindrop occurs, so detachment occurs. So we say sediment erosion have started, and it is not only the direct rainfall. Sometimes raindrop comes from the canopy. Initially, a tree have obstructed the water, obstructed the rain, and then for a longer time period, it is bringing that water in the form of the drips from the canopy of the tree, and it also detach soil from the top surface of the land. Then it transports to nearby channel or nearby rills or gullies, and then sediments start moving in the channel. We say now this is a channel transport. Over here it is the overland transport. Over here the difference you see over here, we have the larger depth of the water. Over here, we have the smaller depth of the water. Both of them are the flowing water. So when sufficient depth is achieved, we say channel flow have been started. Form of the soil erosion, oblique sources of the soil erosion, inter-rill erosion, sheet erosion. What is a rill? Rill is a very small, tiny channel formed in the catchment area. Bring in your mind a plain area. When rainfall occurs, initially sheet flow occurs. Then sheet flow joins together to make the small channels. We can see it over here. So over here, what we are seeing at the top is the sheet flow occurring over here. So then we see that between the sheet flow, because of this sheet flow, some erosion will occur from the top surface. We say this is a sheet erosion. This is a sheet erosion over here. Then small channels are formed within the plain area. Even within the plain area, small channels are formed. We say rills have been formed. So if the rills are also expanding or increasing its size, it means rills are also being eroded. So some soil is also eroded within the rills also. So this is a big, when rills combine together, we say a gully have been formed. And when gullies combine together, we say that channel have been formed. So these are the dynamic processes. These are the hierarchy of the start of the sediment transport. So initially we have the inter-rill erosion between two rills, or we call it sheet erosion. And there is erosion within the rill also. Rill is a small channel. Gully is a little bit larger channel. So rill erosion, gully erosion, and then big channel erosion. In addition to this, soil is also reaching to the channels because of the landslides activities. So these are the common which occurs because of the rainfall only, but sometimes a huge mass of the soil is broken away from a hilltop, and that also causes huge soil deposition in the channels and the reservoir. And sometimes glacier also bring the heavy sediment load along with it. By the way, day before yesterday, there was a there was a GLOF phenomena occurred. I told you GLOF is Glacier Lake Outburst Flood. So a glacier in India give away to the water. Glacier was melted or broken, and the water stored at the back of that glacier that flooded, that gushed downstream side, and on its way, because it was a release of the huge water in the channel of the smaller capacity. On its way, it has washed away a couple of weirs and small dams in between, and it is feared that more than 100 people have died. 100 to 150 people are missing from that area. Still, they are doing the rescue and process over there. So glaciers can also bring the sediment into the channel. Landslide can also bring sediment into the channel, and this soil erosion because of the raindrop and because of the sheet erosion, rill erosion, that can also bring. Why we are studying it? For having a stable channel, we should know how much sediments are coming. Another aspect is when we make a reservoir for storage purpose or for hydropower purpose, we want to conserve its capacity. We want to keep its capacity for longer time period. So how much time it will take to fill that reservoir depends upon soil coming, sediment coming to that reservoir. So that for that purpose also we should know how much is the soil erosion in the catchment area of that reservoir. So for that purpose also we study the sediment erosion. So this reservoir sedimentation is important for us because we make the dam to store water in the reservoir so that we can use that water when we need that water. But that reservoir storage is depleted. That reservoir storage is being taken by the deposited sediment inside it. So we want to manage these sediments in a better way. So these are the things which we want to tell you. What are the factors controlling the erosion? What is the rating curve of the sediment? We have told you simple rating curve. Discharge versus stage hydrograph. Discharge versus stage relationship is called rating curve. Rating curve is discharge versus stage. But if we have sediment discharge or sediment load versus flow versus water discharge, so we say this is a sediment rating curve. So that is, I will show you a sample sediment rating curve. Sediment yield of the catchment is how much sediments are being released by a certain area of the catchment. That is a yield. Or how to manage sedimentation in the reservoir. So what are different ways people do it? So here is the reservoir shown, Tarbela Reservoir. This is a Tarbela Dam, Tarbela Reservoir. This is another dam, another reservoir. So when we construct it, we want to store water inside it. People have given this storage which is done in the reservoir different names. We should be knowing this basic terminology. One part of the total storage in the reservoir is called as dead storage. One part is called as useful storage or live storage, and one part is called as surcharge storage or flood storage. Out of the total water which can be stored in a reservoir, we can distinguish these three parts separately. One is called dead storage, which we usually keep so that the sediment should be deposited in that part. We don't use that water for our irrigation purpose or hydropower purpose. So we usually take the water, we usually use the water between the dead storage and the normal pool storage. This flood storage we keep, or surcharge storage we keep, so that if design flood comes over there into the reservoir, so water will, this volume of water will be used for releasing that flood downstream side safely. So the maximum storage for which this reservoir is designed during the flood time, so that we call as the maximum pool level, or pool level during the flood. Normally, we keep the water up to the normal pool level. In the dry season, water is used for this storage, and we bring it to the lowest possible level in this reservoir. We say minimum pool level. We cannot bring it down, or we don't want to bring it down, because we want that this part should be reserved for storage of the sediment into it. Sediment should not be going downstream side. So these three terms, what is the maximum storage, what is the normal storage or normal pool level, what is the dead storage or minimum pool level, should be known to us, and their definition is written over here. Full reservoir level, the level is the highest water level to which the water surface will rise during normal operation condition, and the maximum water level is when the water level till which it rises while releasing the design flood on the downstream side. Minimum pool level, the level up to which we want to take reservoir, the lowest level up to which we want to take the reservoir. Dead storage is the storage below the minimum pool level, up till the bottom of the bed, this storage. And this usually we keep for storage of the sediment over here. So similar concept over here, please go through them. Yield from the reservoir. Yield can be yield of water. Yield is output. Another name for the output is yield. So when we say this is the yield of water from this watershed, it means we are calculating how much volume of water is coming per unit area of that watershed. Similarly, if we tell how much is the yield of sediment, so sediment load or sediment quantity per unit area of that watershed is called as a sediment yield of that watershed. So yield from the reservoir is the, as it is for watershed, similar is the from the reservoir. Yield is the volume of the water which can be withdrawn from the reservoir. So for a reservoir, yield is the water which can be taken out of the reservoir. Safe yield is that quantity of the water which is sure to be taken out. So these are how much quantity we can find from a reservoir. So I think we leave it. Reservoir storage and reservoir elevation are related with each other. We call them reservoir elevation capacity curve. Elevation is drawn on the vertical axis and capacity or the volume is drawn on the horizontal axis. Usually we get a curve like this. So you should know there is a storage elevation curves available for each reservoir. Similarly, there is an area elevation curves are also available. So this is a typical shape of one of the storage elevation and area elevation curve. Reservoir sedimentation can be, if you have time, go through it. Otherwise, I will tell you how to manage the sediment in a reservoir. There are 3-4 ways sediments are being managed in the real life. One thing initial, we should try to reduce the sediments coming into the reservoir by managing the watershed area, whole watershed area. Watershed is extended over 100 of kilometers square. So over there, forestation can help us reduce sediment coming to the reservoir. Over there, good practices of agriculture. There are bad practice of agriculture, good practices of agriculture that can help us reduce sediment coming to the reservoir. So that can help us reducing catchment vegetation. Construction of the check dams are low height barriers. They can reduce sediments. If sediment comes to the reservoir, then we can flush them if some low level outlets are there in the dam. If dam have some opening at the bottom of the reservoir, we can flush the sediments out. For that, low level outlets are required. And one thing is sediment sluicing. We don't let the sediment deposit in the reservoir. When they come to the reservoir, we let them go downstream. We open the gates and let them go downstream side. So that is few pictures will tell you these things. For example, this watershed has good vegetation and it will be releasing less sediments to the reservoir or to the channel. Here are some good practices for agriculture. If agriculture is done on level plains, in hilly area we cannot have a level plain. So they should make some contour planting if it is done at for a certain strip. They level it down and then carry out the plantation. Then plantation is done at a next lower level. Rather than having a slope over there, we should have steps inside the catchment for agriculture purpose. Then sediment release will be less. If it is a bare land, if it is a naked land, then more sediment will be eroded. If it is covered with vegetation and forest, less sedimentation will be reaching to the area, to the channel downstream and to the reservoir downstream. Or here, sediment is being managed or being controlled with the help of the barriers installed in the path of the water, in the rills and in the gullies. They have tried to reduce the flow velocity by putting some barriers, wooden barriers over here, so that the sediment can be controlled to some extent. They cannot stop the sediment. Similar close-up of those barriers. Sometimes we call them as a check dams, or we call them as a barrier. Here's a gully. You can see a small channel or gully. So they have put some barrier over here. What they do is they reduce the speed of water coming over through the gully, and they can reduce the sediment erosion in this gully part, and so the water coming to the channel downstream will be having less sediment. Here is a contour plantation, a very good practice to reduce the sediment erosion in a hilly area. Contour plantation, so that will cause less sediment erosion over here. Here is the flushing downstream side. When outlets are open, huge quantity of the sediment which are stored in the reservoir, they can be released downstream so that the reservoir capacity can be restored. Reservoir capacity should not be lost. Sometimes in the reservoir, we put a pipe, and that pipe is taken on the downstream side also over the dam. And because of the suction pressure, water is start moving in that pipe. Along with water, some sediment can also go downstream side. And sometimes we carry out the dredging of the sediment. With the help of the shovels, we dredge the sediment, put it in the boat, and put it on the banks. So that is also possible to remove. But that is only possible for smaller reservoir. Larger reservoir, dredging is very costly. So these are some of the ways in which the sediment erosion can be managed in a reservoir. Here, concept of hydrosuction is being told to you. As I told you, there's a boat, a pipe is put in the reservoir bed, and that pipe is released on the downstream side. Because higher head is over here, higher pressure is here, lower pressure here, water start moving in this pipe. Along with the water, sediment are also removed. So we call them as hydrosuction. Another way is bypassing the sediment. We make an obstruction on the upper side and we release the sediment through a bypass channel or bypass pipe on the downstream of the another big dam. So this reservoir is being protected with the help of this smaller sediment trap and moving those on the downstream side. Huge sediments, nearly 1% of the reservoir capacity we are losing every year. All around the world, average is this one. So this introduces you the topic of sediment. How much sediment can be trapped in a reservoir? It is usually asked from us. Tell me how much will be the sediment trapped. This is a curve called as Bruun curve. Remember this, important in hydrology and sediment capacity estimation in a reservoir. So Bruun curve help us find the trapping efficiency of a reservoir. Bruun curve help us find trapping efficiency of a reservoir. This curve have been drawn, have been made from experience of several reservoir trapping efficiency. They have actually seen tens of reservoirs. They saw how much is the flow coming to this reservoir, how much is the sediment coming to this reservoir, how much is trapped inside, how much released downstream side. So using those data, they have proposed this line, they call it median curve for normal ponded reservoir. So this curve is between two parameters. One is called as capacity inflow ratio of the reservoir. On x-axis, it is capacity inflow ratio, capacity of the reservoir and the inflow to the reservoir. So in a whole year, how much is the inflow into a reservoir? That is the flow of the water in that river, normal flow, average flow. And the capacity is the volume, maximum volume. So ratio of this is on the x-axis, capacity ratio inflow. So that should be at x-axis, and the sediment trapped in percentage is on y-axis. For example, for a certain reservoir like Tarbela, if you have capacity to inflow ratio of 0.1, means it can store maximum 10% of the inflowing water in a year. So then its capacity inflow ratio will be 0.1. We can see from this reservoir, it has a trapping efficiency of 90%. So what does it mean? What is trapping efficiency? If 100 units of the sediments are coming to the reservoir, 90 units will be trapped in the reservoir and 10 units will be released downstream side. So this Bruun curve help us find this thing. It's a good and very widely used in sediment management of the reservoir. Here is a figure which is showing you sediment erosion yield all around the world in different area, and its legend is shown at the bottom. You see, here is India, here is Sri Lanka, we are over here. We are in an area in which high sediment yield is occurring. The Himalaya and the Karakoram ranges, they are considered as a very young mountains with respect to geological time scale. They are considered very young. They are still evolving. These Himalaya and Karakoram, they are still evolving. So when they are evolving, that means a large movement occurs over there, and a huge sediment erosion and the sediment yield is occurring in this area. So you see in other areas, such high yield are not observed. So Pakistan, China, India are much prone towards sediment erosion. So our reservoirs are filled at a higher rate as compared to the other areas. So this is the information about the reservoir sedimentation. Why do it occurs? What is soil erosion? How do we categorize them? We are not telling you any big formula over here. A brief background of soil erosion is informed to you. This topic will continue in other subjects also, in hydraulic subject also. Any questions? So next week we will be studying groundwater hydrology. Some of that part you have studied in the lab part also. Formulas of calculation of the safe yield of a certain groundwater. Some definitions like storage coefficient, storativity, permeability, and what is the cone of depression. So these things will be reviewed next time. So that will conclude the topic of hydrology. So if you have any question, you are welcome. Otherwise, I stop it over here. Thank you very much for your patience and listening.